Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. By 5 o'clock, the vineyard had gone the color of late summer honey. String lights hummed over the crushed granite path, and the barrel room breathed out warm oak and fermenting grape skins every time a server pushed through the swinging door. My daughter Riley had insisted on a small ceremony, 40 guests, farm tables, wildflowers, and recycled gin bottles. Sonoma has a way of making even restraint look expensive. I stood at the edge of the lawn with a paper cup of drip coffee I didn't need and watched my grandson Ben at the children's table, 6 years old, shoelaces, proudly double-knotted head, bent over a dinosaur coloring book he'd brought from home. He is the kind of kid who notices the single crooked candle on a cake and straightens it before anyone else sees it tilt. "Gran," he said, appearing suddenly at my elbow, voice small and precise. "His letters are wrong." "Whose letters?" I asked. "The man Riley married." His eyes flicked toward the head table. The new husband, Evan Carr, was laughing at something the best man said. Hands splayed over a linen napkin, attention spill-proof and even. Evan was handsome the way catalogs build men. Hand-cut jaw tie that didn't budge in the breeze, the kind of tan you get from good living and timed golf. He wore French cuffs. Ben was right, the oval cufflinks were engraved, but the letters weren't E and C. "They say N and D," Ben whispered, as if a librarian might shush him. "I can read the curly ones now." I squinted. The light struck chrome and traveled. ND on both wrists. "I think people mix up initials all the time," I said, buying a second to feel for the old professional part of my brain, the one I'd retired 2 years ago. I used to tell federal agents that fraud is rarely a masterpiece, more like a collage of careless edges. Ben's fingers were cold around my hand. "He dropped this," he added, opening his palm. A stiff rectangle of cardstock lay there, damp from his skin. A valet ticket from the front drive, white with a red stripe number stamped in block ink, and beneath it neatly typed, "Name Noah Denton." The string lights above us hummed louder, or maybe that was my pulse. "Where did you find it?" "Under that long table where Riley sits," he said. I crawled to get a purple crayon that rolled. "Show me," I said, and he tugged me past the dance floor, past the DJ who looked like he'd been born wearing headphones, to the head table draped in a length of raw linen. The fabric fell to the ground, hiding a neat thicket of chair legs and the shimmer of the bride's champagne heels. "Pretend to tie my shoe," Ben murmured. I knelt automatically and tugged at a knot that didn't need tugging. From that angle, the world inverted, a fringe of flowers became forest chair rungs, turned into a bleached fence. On the gravel, near the third chair from the left, something winked half of a cufflink. Twin, the tiny hinge bent. The engraving was clear in the shadow, ND. I took 2 photos with my phone thumb quiet against the volume button. In the reflection of a wineglass stem, I caught a sliver of the best man's face. He'd introduced himself earlier as Cole Reeves, the sort of man who holds eye contact like a challenge coin. He'd seen me kneel. Now he lifted his glass in a small salute across the distance, a smile that functioned as a warning more than a greeting. I stood and dusted the grit from my knees. "You okay?" Riley asked, sliding up in a blur of satin and eucalyptus. She smelled like clean rain, and the first time I'd let her wear perfume. Her happiness had an actual temperature. I could feel it beating through the air. "Ben's shoe," I said, and smiled in a way that would photograph well. "How's the food?" "Charred corn salad is unreal," she said, already turning to hug a cousin who had materialized with an iPhone angled for a selfie. Evan arrived right on cue, carrying 2 champagne flutes by their stems like delicate instruments. "There's my favorite little man," he said, and Ben's shoulders went still under his tiny blazer. Evan crouched until their eyes were level. "You doing okay, buddy?" Ben nodded once. He is polite even when his instincts scream. Evan straightened and turned his smile on me. He is gifted at that turn, the pivot where warmth finds a new target without losing voltage. "Maggie, right? You look radiant tonight." "Riley tells me you built your career reading people. I feel very seen. I can do polite better than almost anyone I know. I did it for 30 years in rooms with one-way glass stale coffee and a wall clock that sounded like a metronome." "It's a mother's job," I said. "Congratulations." He angled his wrist to set a flute on the table. The cufflink flashed ND. The letters weren't a jeweler's mistake. The letters were an identity. Out of habit, I cataloged the details I'd need later if later arrived. Watch face clean as a mirror, Audemars Piguet or a convincing counterfeit. Shirt cut to hide a phone in the left breast pocket. A faint impression on his ring finger that suggested a band had come off recently, not gone on. When he turned to flag a server, a valet stub identical to Ben's card peeked from his jacket's inner pocket. I couldn't see a name. "Big day," I said to say something. "The biggest," he answered and rested a casual hand on Ben's shoulder. Casual the way a paperweight is casual on a stack of unpaid bills. Riley and I are lucky. "Luck is another word for timing," I said. Then we're blessed with both. He was still smiling when Cole's hand landed on his backlight, directing. Photos, Cole told him, voice pitched for intimacy, eyes on me measuring. They want you by the olive tree while the sun is perfect. Duty calls. Evan lifted the flutes, then left one for Riley, who reappeared with a bobby pin clenched between her teeth and laughter still hooked in her mouth. Back in a sec, babe. They moved across the grass, the way practiced dancers cross a stage, people making way, heads turning. I watched the set of Evan's shoulders when he thought no one watched him. A man's true posture is the split second after performance. Evan's shoulders said calculation. Gran Ben said, tugging my sleeve again. Up close I could see he'd been tracing the beveled edge of the valet ticket with his thumb, whirring the card into a soft bloom. Let me take that, I told him, and slipped the rectangle into my clutch behind a packet of tissues and 2 peppermints. You did the right thing. Is Riley okay? He asked. She looks more than okay, I said, because she did. He accepted the answer because it contained a truth. A server in a black apron stepped between us, carrying a tray of mini crab cakes on skewers, heat and butter and Old Bay. The music rose, Sam Cooke spun into something newer, then fell. As the DJ adjusted the mix and the microphone squealed. Someone tapped a glass for speeches. I moved along the perimeter the way I always have when my brain hums. The staff had set up a hydration station near the herb garden, glass dispensers with citrus slices floating like coins. In the reflection on the mason jar, I watched Cole speak into Evan's ear. Evan nodded once, twice. When he checked his watch, his smile reset into place as if on a timer. Riley's maid of honor, her college roommate with new bangs, talked about freshman dorms and second chances, and the guests made the sound, I've learned, is halfway between envy and approval. I took another photo of the CUFFLINK, half buried in gravel, because memory is excellent, but a lens is impartial. On my way back to Ben, one of the valet attendants hustled up the path from the front drive, breathless, a stack of white tickets limp in his hand from the damp fog rolling off the vines. Excuse me, he said to no one and everyone. If anyone picked up a lost claim stub, the owner called in a panic. It's for a black Range Rover, last name Denton. We can square you a drink for the trouble. Sim? I felt the lightest electrical tick in my molars. Being retired has not changed the wiring. Maybe check at the head table, I told him, and smiled benignly over the rim of my coffee as he thanked me and kept moving. He was a kid no more dangerous than a paper cut. The dangerous things wear cufflinks. Ben had gone back to his coloring the dinosaur's belly, now a brisk, determined green. He likes to finish what he starts. I put a hand on his shoulder and felt the jump of his small muscles, energy coiled, ready to run if I said the word. Gran, he whispered without looking up. Do grown-ups ever wear someone else's letters? Sometimes, I said. Sometimes they borrow things that don't belong to them. He considered this the way he considers everything seriously, with the gravity of a 6-year-old who knows the world is larger than adults admit. He shaded the dinosaur's tail a darker green. The string lights buzzed. The oak trees collected the last of the light and held it. When the photographer asked for all the mothers to come forward, I left my coffee, smoothed a wrinkle in my dress, and stepped onto the grass that was damp enough to remind me I should have worn different shoes. Cameras lifted. People turned their faces toward good fortune. I tightened my fingers around the valet ticket in my clutch. Paper ink, a wrong pair of letters catching the glow. Small things, but small things have set bigger rooms on fire. I smiled for the flash. By the time we hit the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, Ben was asleep with his head tilted toward the window, mouth open, the valet ticket's red stripe faintly imprinting his palm like he'd dreamt it there. The bay threw back a pewter shine. Oakland waited with its checkerboard of porch lights and the small sounds of people settling in. Riley texted 3 photos from the Vineyard, here in profile laughing, Evan's hand on her lower back, the sunset doing its easy magic, and a single line, best night. I typed a heart and didn't send it. At home, I carried Ben to the guest room, undid his blazer with the care you use on a sleeping animal, and slipped the valet ticket into an empty glasses case on my desk. The house had the night noises I know, the fridge's soft engine, the heater's thin click, the neighborhood cat's diplomatic yowl as it patrolled the fence. I made coffee because my hands wanted a task, then opened my laptop and docked my phone beside it. The table in my small office, a thrifted lawyer's desk that still smelled faintly of lemon oil, had been a war room once. Old habits aren't souvenirs. They're tools kept sharp out of superstition. I started with the cufflink. On my phone, I scrubbed through the live photo like a DJ forward, back forward. I caught the frame with the engraving clean in the shadow. ND serifs, narrow, shallow cut, not a monogram you get at the mall. I sent the frame to my desktop, zoomed, and dragged the image into a folder named Reception. Then, the valet ticket. White, red stripe, 6 digits, name Noah Denton typed in a sans serif that every valet company in California seems to have agreed upon. Google is a chaos engine with perfect recall. I tried the obvious first Noah Denton, in quotes, plus Marine, then Sonoma, then Range Rover Bay Area. A LinkedIn landed a Noah D with 3 connections, no photo current position consultant. A 2019 charity gala list had a Noah Danielson 2 tables over. Alias families breed like vines. I opened the Secretary of State portal. Car Advisory Group, LLC, filed in Delaware registered agent with an address that exists to forward mail. An outpost in San Mateo with a suite number that on the street view belonged to a building where every window had the same blinds. I clicked Officer Member and got the digital equivalent of a shrug. One more tab, Car Harbor Holdings LLC, Cayman, the kind of name chosen because water smooths everything. I pulled the CUFFLINK frame into an image search. Somewhere in the filtered results, I found a jeweler's Instagram custom oval cufflinks, brushed rhodium serifed letters, a second shot with a box lid, Auburndale Jewelers, Philadelphia. The caption, Commission for ND Classic and Clean, comments full of heart eyes. A store that takes pride in its work also takes pride in its tags. Their photos from last winter had a man's hand the same triangle of scar near the thumb knuckle that I'd seen when Evan set a flute on the table. I took notes in the way I prefer Paper Pilot G2 block letters that make their own argument. Names dates the thread of an idea Noah, ND Cufflinks, Delaware LLC, Car Brand, Cayman Sub, Movement. I circled Ben's trust and drew a hard arrow to health education exception. In families like ours, the paperwork is always tidy until it isn't. My phone lit up with a call that came labeled Marcus Penn. I hadn't told him I needed him yet. He still had my number under Holt Maggie call when you're bored of peace. Tell me you started without me, he said by way of hello. Voice warm and unbothered the way it gets when he's already in his car chasing a thought. Wedding cufflinks, I said. ND not EC, valet ticket for Noah Denton. Delaware entities, Car Advisory Group, and something wetter for offshore. You do retire interesting, he said. I'll pull everything I can on Denton as a person and as a ghost. I've got a guy who can map Delaware shells to their bank correspondence. Give me the plate off the Range Rover and I'll give you a real name. I didn't get the plate, I said. I got the printer's choice of font. And a best man with a stare like a flashbang. That'll do. I'll start with widows and stairs, he said, and hung up without goodbye the way we always have. Our shorthand saves our breath for the running. At 12:17 a.m., Riley called. Her voice was thick with the soft fatigue of champagne. Is Ben okay, she asked, and the mother in her used my name like a small apology before she could catch it. He's out cold, I said. I could bounce a quarter off that sleep. Evan thought he seemed overwhelmed, she said. He mentioned a camp he knows for exceptional kids, doctors and all that. That's a broad net, I said, keeping my voice flat enough to skate on. We can talk to Ben's pediatrician if you want opinions you didn't ask for. Mom, she said lightly, that years-old warning embedded in one syllable. It's a camp, not a diagnosis. Send me the camp's name, I said. In the pause, a second voice, male and smooth, asked Riley if she'd seen his phone. Her hand covered the mic. He's looking for it, she said with a half laugh. Talk tomorrow. Sure, I said, and when the line cut, I sat another full minute without moving and watched the call time count breath back into the room. I slept badly. At 6:12, my Apple Watch vibrated my wrist with a weather alert, marine layer and flights delayed out of SFO, and a notification from the camera at my front door, a raccoon in the rosemary. Ben padded into the kitchen in footy pajamas that had begun their life as a set of dinosaurs and were now minor camouflage. He ate toast with peanut butter and asked if today was Saturday. It's any day you want it to be, I said, and he nodded like that could be true. I called the Vineyard and asked for the event coordinator. We did find a cufflink, she said cheerfully. Our team keeps a lost and found, but it was picked up already by one of the groomsmen. Nice suit hair you could see yourself in. Did he leave a name, I asked. Cole, she said, and the click of a keyboard skittered down the line. That's all I've got. Thank you, I said, and crossed off cufflink under evidence that sits still. At 9:03, there was a knock on my door with the rhythm of someone who expects to be let in. Evan stood on my porch in cuffed jeans and a Henley that made a point of pretending he doesn't own suits. A to-go tray held 2 lattes. A bakery bag had the weight of something with butter. Behind his shoulder, the street had its weekday quiet. The neighbor's car nose out for an exit. The mail truck's patient inches toward the corner. I figured I'd bring breakfast and pick up the man of the hour, he said, grin just wide enough to show he'd practiced modesty. Riley said 11, I said. You're early. I like being early, he said. Saves surprises for other people. He didn't wait for an invitation, but stepped into the foyer with the confidence of a man who never hears no as anything but a comma. He glanced at the photos on my wall, Riley at 5, with missing front teeth. Richard at the county fair with a paper crown. Ben last Christmas with icing on his chin. I carried the coffee to the kitchen because not offering would be its own declaration. Ben, I called Evans here. Ben's small feet hammered down the hallway, then slowed to a shuffle. He stood by the kitchen threshold, not stepping onto the tile. Evan crouched again, patient. How's my guy? He asked. We were thinking about something fun for you when we get back, this perfect camp where they let smart kids try the stuff they're amazing at. Doctors who help them work through the tricky parts so they can be even better. Ben looked at me and then at the paper bag as if it might be a clue. Do they have dinosaurs? He asked. They have everything, Evan said, and the everything was a sales pitch. I poured coffee into mugs I trust and sat. What's the camp called? I asked. It's a foundation program, he said, setting the bakery bag between us like a neutral third party. We can talk details later. Riley has the brochure I sent. Their doctor's bill insurance? I asked. He had to hear the knives under the cloth. They're out of network, he said smoothly, but Riley told me about Ben's education trust. There's a carve-out for health and developmental needs. This fits. No reason not to use what's there to give him a leg up. He made it sound like we'd been stingy by not helping ourselves sooner. Ben's trust was a promise Richard built when success felt like something that could hold. We'd raised Riley on public schools and packed lunches. He wanted his grandson to have a net woven from careful work. Ben picked up a croissant and broke it neatly in half. He gave me the bigger piece. My mom's coming at 11, he said to Evan. We'll be ready, Evan said, standing. I need to check on a couple of things before we head out. Big day? He set his latte on the counter and left a ring I would later wipe with the heel of my hand. At the door, he looked back into the house like he was memorizing it or measuring it or both. Maggie, he said in that tone men use when they want your first name. To stand in for your ascent, Riley's lucky to have you close. Luck is another word, I said, for proximity. He smiled inefficiently. Then he was gone, and the house let the breath it had been holding slide out of its vents. 10 minutes later, my laptop pinged. DocuSign action required authorization to transfer assets. The email addressed to Riley had me copied as a secondary contact from the time when her inbox felt like a fire hose and mine felt like a broom. The subject line was the anodyne corporate that covers every SIN consolidation for tax efficiency. The packet had 3 tabs: authorization, disclosure, signature. The destination account, Car Harbor Holdings LLC beneficiary, Car Advisory Group advisor of record blank. The correspondence address sat under a Cayman P.O. box that probably didn't need a lock because doors are a courtesy in some neighborhoods. I called Riley. She answered on the first ring, breathless in the way people are when they're zipping suitcase zippers and talking around hangars. Isn't it neat, she said. Howard moved our account so the fees are lower and it's simpler for us. He says it saves on taxes this year. Howard moved what I asked. Howard Lang, she said as if the full name might reassure me. He's been amazing since Richard died. He and Evan really hit it off. Forward me his note, I said, and please don't sign anything until I look. Mom, she said, patient because she loves me, irritated because she is 38. I know how to sign my name. You do, I said. That's the part I'm worried about. A second email arrived while we were still on the line. This one from Howard directly, all routine as discussed with Evan. We'll tidy this up before you travel. No rush. Beneath his name, the footer with his firm's logo and the small print that never feels as small to me as it looks. I hung up, printed the DocuSign packet because paper makes people honest, and took a red pen to the language that liked to hide in gentle verbs authorize, consolidate, optimize. I circled the beneficiary fields and the line that gave trading discretion to an entity that didn't exist in Riley's life last week. The edges were careless, but the structure had teeth. At 10:41. My phone buzzed with a text, front door. I checked the camera. Cole stood on my porch with the expression of a man running an errand for a friend. He rang once, twice, then took out his own phone, typed something, and waited. When I didn't open, he slid an envelope under the door. Thick white, no name, and left. I stared at it from the hallway, letting the possibility of powder glass or nothing decide how long I was going to be cautious. When I slid it open with a butter knife, a single cufflink fell into my palm. Oval. Brushed. ND. The hinge fixed cleanly like someone had taken it to a bench that morning. A note the size of a business card rode the bottom of the envelope. You dropped this. No signature. The you did not mean me. My phone rang before I'd put the cufflink down. Marcus. I've got your man in 2 states, he said. Noah Denton plays golf in Scottsdale and grief counselor in Pittsburgh. In both places, he married fast and left faster. One wife's obituary reads like a brochure. The other died at the bottom of a staircase the year her health insurance finally got generous. Cause of death, I asked. Unremarkable, he said. Which is remarkable. I've got corporate bridges from Car Advisory to a Cayman box you already found. And Maggie checked Riley's inbox. There's an electronic signature request with a timer on it. Somebody wants this done before the ink can smell like ink. I looked at the DocuSign again. Expires 24 hours. Riley's name in the upper corner, the signature box waiting like it had all the time in the world. Ben leaned against my side, hot cheek on my arm, and watched me trace the red circle I'd drawn around a phrase that had decided it wanted to be important. I left Ben with Mrs. Alvarez next door, his knuckles still shiny with peanut butter, and crossed the bridge again with the DocuSign packet buckled into the passenger seat like an unruly child. The bay wore its morning marine layer like a shawl. Marcus texted a pin and 3 words that cut all the choices down to one Sausalito seaplane dock. The lot sat at the end of a sliver road where the water-licked pilings and gulls worked their racket. A line of neon vests moved like cardinals around a de Havilland beaver on float's tail, flashing a tail number I read twice without meaning to. Avgas hung in the air. The small terminal was a washed wood box with a check-in counter, a glass bowl of peppermint candies, and a laminated map with dotted lines arcing toward the Farallones and further. A hand-lettered sign promised Island Hop Private Charter 1 p.m. Riley stood by the window with a carry-on and the kind of smile people practice in bathrooms. Evan leaned over the counter talking to a ground agent, his tone intimate and steady like they were planning a surprise party. Cole stood near the door with a garment bag and the nothing-to-see-here posture of a man used to convincing rooms not to notice him. When the door clicked behind me, Cole's eyes found the sound and made it personal. Mom, Riley said, confusion first and then a defensive lift to her chin. Is Ben okay? He's with Mrs. Alvarez, I said. He's fine. I set the manila folder on the counter, laid my palm over it, and looked at Evan. His smile registered me, then cooled a degree. Maggie, he said, adding California air to the consonants. You made good time. I'm consistent, if nothing else, I said. Everything squared with the operator, he told the agent, that private voice still in place. We'll load in 10. The agent nodded and slid a clipboard toward him, then glanced at me the way service people do when they feel the static. I turned the DocuSign printout so the top page faced up authorization to transfer assets and tapped the recipient line with one fingernail. Before you fly anywhere, I said to Riley without looking away from Evan, you need to see where your money is about to sleep. Riley kept her suitcase handle in a grip that would have impressed her tennis coach. She moved closer to me, shoulder almost touching mine, eyes gone to the precise blue they find when she's reading fine print. Evan shifted an inch to block the counter like a courteous bouncer. Cole's hand ghosted over the garment bag's zipper. This isn't the place, Evan said softly. It's exactly the place, I said. The timing isn't mine. You got an email, Riley asked. 2, I said. One from Howard, one from a robot who spells consolidation the same way every time. Riley exhaled and pinched the bridge of her nose the way she has since algebra. Howard walked me through it, she said to me then, to Evan, right? Howard's a professional, Evan said. He explained the benefits. You wanted fewer fees, less friction. This does that. It moves everything to Car Harbor Holdings, I said. A Cayman box that funnels to an advisory with your husband's name and no advisor of record. Your signature gives trading discretion to a structure that's convenient for exactly one person. I slid out the second sheet, the beneficiary schedule, and a third page I'd stapled to the packet, a print of my screenshot from the jeweler's Instagram brushed rhodium cufflinks engraved ND next to a lid stamped Auburndale Jewelers, Philadelphia. Next to it, the live photo frame from the gravel, the same letters in shadow. I placed the valet ticket on top, last like a garnishing slice of lemon named Noah Denton. Evan didn't look down. He kept his eyes on me and smiled like I told a joke both of us were too tired to enjoy. That's cute, he said not unkindly. It's also a leap. Then let's shorten it, I said. I'll say a name. If it isn't yours, tell me I'm wrong and I'll go home and bake a cake. Noah Denton. Cole shifted his weight. The ground agent set his pen down with deliberate care. Riley's attention moved where I wanted it to move, to Evan's sleeves, to the little ovals at his wrists. Monograms are presents from people who believe in first guesses, Evan said. A friend had those made and messed up the letters. It happens. Ask any groom how many things ship wrong in the last week. Then the valet wrote your friend's name on his ticket, I said. And your friend wore your watch, stood where you stood, has your scar. Scar, Riley asked quietly. Near the thumb, I said. You got it sometime after the jeweler's Instagram and before last night. There's a kitchen photo in Howard's holiday email to clients' family and finance, where you're carving a turkey without it. Evan's smile pressed itself thinner. I'm not explaining my wrist to your mother on my honeymoon, he said to Riley. He turned the smile back on me and added warmth like a bartender refilling a glass he'd shorted. Maggie, I respect that you care about your daughter. I plan to, too. But showing up at a terminal to wave paper around won't make your fears behave. Paper doesn't care what I feel, I said. I flipped to the signature page. It cares what she signs. Riley kept her eyes on the packet and found the beneficiary line I'd circled in red. She read the words silently, the way readers do when they're building a case against a feeling. What happens if I don't sign this? She asked without looking up. We do it after we get back. Evan said, easy and immediate. Or we don't do it at all and pay more than we need to. I don't marry money, Riley. I married you. Cole inclined his head toward the window, small, precise. Outside, a sheriff's boat crawled past the dock with a wake like a hand smoothing a sheet. A harbor patrol car rolled into the lot and idled behind a white Sprinter van. Marcus texted Harbor Patrol inbound. No heroics. I put the phone face down on the counter. Look at me, Riley said. She waited until Evan did, until the full strength of that catalog face faced her. Did you talk to Howard about my accounts without me? We all want the same outcome, he said. Lower cost, simpler structure. He works for you. He doesn't move a paperclip without your okay. Did you introduce this Cayman thing, she asked. It's not a thing, he said, almost laughing. It's a jurisdiction. It exists because our tax code is a maze. People use guides. And the camp, I asked, and the word had weight now. Riley told me you'd spin that, he said without glancing at me. Ben is exceptional. He deserves resources. Riley's eyes slid to mine, and I saw the memory arrive the conversation after midnight about a camp. With doctors about ease and help and language designed to sound like care. The ground agent cleared his throat softly. We should board if you want to make 1 o'clock, he said, voice professionally neutral. Evan spread his hands to include all of us in his reasonableness. We can table this and enjoy the afternoon, he said. Or we can keep rearranging words and miss what we planned. Riley placed her hand flat on the packet as if testing whether it might be hot. I'm not signing anything right now, she said. The air in the room shifted by half a degree. Evan's face held, then adjusted. Your call, he said, mild. He turned toward the agent. We'll reschedule. Cole was already unspooling. He slid the garment bag over his shoulder and palmed the door open. The harbor patrol officers came in as if to ask about parking eyes doing the work their mouths didn't. One asked the agent for a manifest. The agent handed it over without looking at Evan. Everything okay, the officer asked. Code. That means we're here because of something we won't name in front of you. Smooth as glass, Evans said, and his voice carried what it needed to carry assurance for strangers' distance for us. Riley took her hand off the packet and reached for her suitcase handle. The sound of metal catching plastic was louder than it needed to be. She didn't look at Evan when she spoke. I'm going home, she said. I need space. Evan nodded once, a man agreeing with the weather. I'll get the car, he said, and stepped outside into the strip of sun that had fought through the fog. Cole ghosted after him. They spoke 10 feet from the door. Cole's hands did a lot of work while his mouth did very little. Evan's jaw moved once in a way that didn't belong to the rest of his face. Riley closed her eyes for the length of a breath and opened them again with that clarity I've seen twice in her life once, when she stepped onto a stage for the solo she hadn't wanted and hit the first high note dead center, and once when she signed the hospice papers with Richard because the fight had named its end without asking permission. Do you have the car? She asked me. I do, I said. She nodded and lifted the suitcase. The ground agent slid the peppermint bowl in her direction like a courtesy he could afford. She took one without registering that she had. The harbor patrol officers drifted toward the door as if pulled by air. Evan held it open for us as we passed, courtesy stuck to him like static. Text me when you land, he said, habit or performance. Riley didn't answer. The dock creaked under our feet. Gulls called over the water like they were telling a joke only they found funny. I put my hand on the small of my daughter's back, steady pressure, not guiding just there. The manila folder rode under my arm, light as paper, heavy as everything it contained. We didn't go back to Sonoma. Riley booked the first flight east she could find and texted a 3-word message from the rideshare on 101. I need home. By sundown, the jet's windows were black mirrors, and our reflections rode the cabin with us. Riley's jaw set to a new angle, my hand a steadying weight on the folder balanced across my knees. Ben's face filled my phone for a minute, over the Pacific, peanut butter crust on his cheek like a badge. Mrs. Alvarez says I can sleep in the fort, he reported, then added like a man swearing in, I'll guard the dinosaurs. Chicago met us with wind that knew our names. The rideshare slid past brick 2 flats and late pumpkins sagging on stoops, then eased to the curb in front of Riley's place, a narrow modern box on a leafy street where the maples had already decided which trees would give up first. Inside the house wore travel-silent suitcases against the entry bench, a stack of parcels we hadn't stopped to sign for the sort of order that looks like a photo until someone breathes. Riley moved through the rooms, turning on small pools of light entry stairs, the kitchen's oversing pendant that threw down a coin of brightness on the butcher block. She stood in it, hands flat on the wood, and let the light hold her steady. I clicked on the living room lamp for the wider comfort of a 60-watt circle and set the manila folder by the fruit bowl. Tea, I asked. It was a thing I knew how to do with my hands. Please, she said. The kettle started its thin whistle. The fridge door opened to reveal the arithmetic of a life. Paused half a jar of marinara, 3 yogurts, a honey bear, gone opaque. Riley found a mint tea packet in the drawer with the takeout menus and put it on the counter like an agreement to keep breathing. I felt the wrongness as a temperature drop rather than a sound. The kitchen air sharpened mint in winter. My thumb found the crown of my watch. "Don't," a voice said from the dark mouth of the hallway. Light found Evan in slices a shoulder or wrist, the oval flash of a cufflink I now knew by feel. He stepped into the pendant circle slow and precise, as if light were a fluid he didn't want to spill. His smile wasn't on his face. Riley's shoulders squared. "How did you get in?" "I live here," he said lightly, and showed the key he didn't need to show. We were going to celebrate being home. His left hand came up empty and open to prove nothing. His right hand stayed close to his thigh. When he lifted it, a clear square clung to his index finger like a scrap of tape gel center milky under the light. "It's a patch," he said evenly to fill the space where a guess might grow. "A microdose would make anyone soft. A bigger dose would make the mess we all say we didn't see coming." "Take it off your finger," I said. Eventually, he said, "I want us to talk first." Riley's voice stayed steady the way she reads to a room of children who all need different things. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should your mother at a terminal," he said, and the smile found half its voltage. "And yet," he curled the hand with the patch toward himself, keeping it off of everything. His other hand produced a syringe from the hip of his jacket and held it up between two fingers like a prop. No label, clear fluid, the kind of needle that exists to frighten more than to deliver. He set it on the counter with a soft click that was louder than it should have been. "Salt water," he said casual, "for the theater." "This is a kitchen," I said, "not a theater." He glanced around at the life he'd furnished for a month. "It's all a theater," he said. "You of all people know that." Riley didn't move her hands off the butcher block. She didn't look at the patch. She kept her eyes on his face with the kind of attention that changes physics. "You need to leave." He took a careful step closer, raised hand away from her. "I need your attention for 3 minutes. Then I'm gone." "Speak," I said. He exhaled through his nose, recalibrating. "You poisoned the well today," he said to me without heat. To her face, no less. "You could have made this elegant. Instead, you brought an audience." "Elegance is a word people use when they want harm to dress nice," I said. He turned to Riley. "You and I agreed on the point," he said. "Less friction, fewer fees. We can skip the Cayman if it bothers you. The structure lives without it." "Did you speak to Howard without me?" she asked. "Howard called me after Richard's memorial," he said so simply it could have been true. "He wanted to be sure you had help. We both did." My thumb pressed my watch crown 3 times. The haptic thump on my wrist was the smallest relief a doorbell rung in a far room. Evan's eyes flicked once to my arm and back. He didn't change posture, but something in the angle of his head marked the sound in the room he couldn't hear. The kettle's whistle decided to be brave. I clicked the burner off and let steam blur the pendant's hard edge. "You don't need the patch," Riley said. "You have words." He laughed once. "Words got me this far. Paper would have done the rest. But paper lost its nerve this morning. So here we are." The phone on the counter lit with a rectangle of Ben's face, and the ascending tones that have made more trouble in kitchens than whiskey. "FaceTime, Ben." Riley's breath hitched. Her eyes moved reflexively toward the sound. Evan's did too, only that much, only a glance. Riley drove her right elbow back like a dancer who finds the beat after a missed count. It hit Evan's ribs with the clean thud of a door shut hard. His breath left in a shape that matched his first swear word. The hand with the patch faltered. His fingers splayed to save the square of gel from falling, and in that split, pinch second, his left shoulder opened. "I don't throw like I used to. I still swing like I mean it." The cast iron skillet sat on the stove where it always does, black and seasoned with a decade of breakfasts. I grabbed the handle with a dish towel and brought the pan down on his wrist, where tendons walk close to bone. The sound was iron against physics, a dense, ringing truth. The patch snapped free and clung harmlessly to the underside of the pan like a moth. Evan's body made 3 decisions at once. None of them elegant. The syringe skittered, his knees went soft, and his mouth found another word he hadn't used in front of us yet. Riley stepped sideways away from him and brought her forearm down on the hand that thought it might grab. The syringe spun under the dishwasher lip and out of the play. He came up fast for a man who'd been introduced to iron. I'm older than my arm believes. He hit me in the shoulder with the kind of heel-of-hand strike you learn in a class where nobody wears name tags. My back found the cabinet. The pan clanged to the floor. The patch rode its underside like a bad idea. The front door blew open with the noise of a story changing its mind. 2 uniforms, 1 plainclothes voices braided police hands where Evan froze, then ran the arithmetic. He lifted both hands, palms white wrist, already bruising in a thumbprint bloom. The officer closest to him took his arm, rotated him, clicked steel. The other officer put a foot on the cast iron to keep the kitchen from adding gravity to the list. "Everyone, okay?" the plainclothes asked, eyes doing their inventory. My shoulder, Riley's face, the clear square stuck to the skillet like a dead window. "We're upright," I said. "The adhesive is the point. Don't touch the underside." "Copy," he said, and pulled on gloves that whisper their own warning. He eased the patch into an evidence envelope, then crouched to fish the syringe out with a spoon. He didn't ask a question he couldn't safely hear an answer to. Evan tried on the smile that had charmed 100 rooms and failed the fitting. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, and sounded like a man who'd overwatered a plant and wanted credit for how green the mess was. The uniform steering him toward the door didn't answer the way people don't answer doorbells they didn't invite. Outside, a second set of police moved someone against a dark SUV and laid him across his choices. Cole's shoulders slumped in a posture I recognized a man who has agreed with inevitability. The kitchen smelled like hot metal and mint. Riley leaned against the island and kept one hand spread on the wood, the way a captain keeps a hand on the rail. Her face was pale in a new configuration that made her look like the child who used to show me her report cards without breathing. "You were watching," she said, voice even. "The watch listened," I said. "It told the right people." The plainclothes looked up from the evidence bags. "We'll want statements," he said. "We'll want to secure your phones and copy messages. We'll want a list of what you think matters and the things you think don't." "I have a folder you'll enjoy," I said. "Spoken like a woman who labels tabs," he said, almost smiling, then stepped back into the hallway to talk into his shoulder mic. Riley opened the dishwasher, found a clean glass, and filled it at the tap with a precision that turned off the faucet at the exact decibel that made quiet. She drank, put the glass down, and drank again. I could see the moment the adrenaline decided to leak out of her limbs, leaving the ordinary weight of a body after trouble. My phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus Penn. I answered and let him talk. "Airport police have Cole," he said. "He had an overnight in a garment bag with a suit that has seen some things. Your guy, our guy, is going to spend a long night being read. But listen to me for the part that will make your mouth go dry. The wires don't end with him. I've got signature authority on Riley's accounts that doesn't belong to Riley. There's an insider on the paperwork with a keycard to every door your family owns." I looked at the DocuSign pages scattered in their red circles. The beneficiary line Riley hadn't signed. The advisory that had wanted its discretion blessed before seaplanes' floats kissed water. "Name?" I asked. "Working it," he said. "But the trail doesn't look new. Whoever this is didn't show up this month. They were here when Richard was alive." Riley set the glass down with both hands, careful as if the counter had become a scale. Outside, the wind shifted and ran its palm down the face of the house. The pendant light made our small circle of brightness, and the rest of the kitchen waited its turn. The night was a grid of interviews printouts, and the kind of tired that settles deep and stops arguing. By morning, Ben was back in my kitchen building a fort out of couch cushions, while Riley sat with a legal pad and crossed out anything that didn't feel like today. The cast-iron skillet slept in the sink like a retired weapon. The manila folder sat on the table with its red circles and the crease my hand had made in it. Detective Sarah Walsh arrived in a gray suit that had learned not to wrinkle. She took our phones, mirrored what needed mirroring, and left 2 officers in a cruiser half a block down with orders to be boring. "If anyone from your financial orbit shows up uninvited," she said, "stall. We like doors opened on purpose." At 11, the doorbell gave one quick courteous ring. Howard Lang stood on my porch with a leather folio and a warmth calibrated to the Midwest. He had the look of a man who knows good chairs. "Terrible business last night," he said. Once he'd stepped inside and seen Riley at the table, her pen marking something final. "I wanted to check on you both, and to clear the air. Transitions are vulnerable times." "Coffee?" I asked, because pouring is the language people expect from grandmothers. "Black," he said, and set the folio on the table where my folder could see it. He turned to Riley with the face he uses for widows and newly hopefuls. "We can shelve all the consolidation, of course. We only moved at your request." "I didn't request Cayman," she said. "Cayman is a tool, not a destination," he said, smiling at his metaphor. "Lower friction, less drag. Your late husband appreciated efficiency." I set a mug in front of him and set my phone face down beside the sugar bowl. The voice memo app had already begun its quiet work. The red bar would look like nothing at all to anyone who wasn't looking. "Evan introduced you," I said. Howard adjusted his cuff. "We travel in the same rooms," he said. "Talented people find each other." 14 families, I said, keeping it light, almost curious. "That's a lot of talent." He paused, then the briefest flicker in the controlled surface of a man who likes smooth water. "We have a large book," he said, "if that's what you mean. You broker introductions. You suggest efficiencies. Paper moves. Fees flow. Evan steps in where grief lives. If the paper signs, the lattice holds. If it doesn't, other pressures appear." He reached for his coffee and changed his mind to take time. "You've had a shock," he said softly to Riley. "I told Evan moving anything before your trip was too ambitious." Riley stared at him in the way she looks at kids who have rehearsed an answer they think is better than the truth. "You emailed me at midnight," she said. "You CC'd Evan." He opened the folio. Tab sections. An original trust summary in Richard's tidy old-fashioned courier. My printer's red circles intruded like a foreign alphabet. Howard's tone shifted a half step downward, the way men modulate when they want to be the voice you trust when you doubt your own. Let's not let last night distort years of... The doorbell rang again. A thin slice of relief cut through me, and I let it pass without showing. Expecting anyone, he asked. Packages, I said. He closed the folio. This has become adversarial, and I dislike that. I've kept you whole through storms most people fail to forecast. And now you sit here taking notes like I'm the weather. You are the weather, I said. You choose where the rain falls. Something harder rolled across his mouth and was gone. He stood smoothing the line of his jacket. I'll give you space, he said. I'll be in touch when your better angels come back from wherever they're hiding. He reached for the folio. Beneath it, his hand found something else quick and practiced a slim auto-injector the size of a marker. He palmed it with the ease of a man who has signed for more deliveries than he's opened. The cap was the color of hospital summer. He stepped toward me as if to accept the coffee he'd declined. Don't, Riley said. He smiled without teeth. We're all friends here. Howard, I said, and pitched my voice into the place where it turns mirrors toward men. You've been doing this long enough to think you invented it. You didn't. The only original thing in this room is your nerve. He didn't look at my phone. He looked at my wrist at the watch face that had learned to call people without being told. He looked at the front windows where a cruiser's roofline was just out of the frame, and the wind made the maple lean the way it always had. He moved anyway, a small, efficient pivot. I knocked his forearm with the heel of my hand. The injector clattered against the chair rung and went under. He grabbed for my wrist, and I let my body fall backward into the table, taking the weight out of his angle. Riley shoved the chair hard with her hip. It caught his shin and made him swear in an indoor voice. The front door opened on its own authority. Detective Walsh stepped in with one uniform at her shoulder and another at the driveway, calling out positions to no one any of us could see. Hands, she said, and Howard's did what hands do when steel is nearby. The uniform found the injector under the chair and bagged it with a label that will become a number that will become a page. Howard did not ask for a lawyer. He asked for dignity, which meant not having his tie askew while he was walked to the car. Riley watched him go with her hand flat on the table, her coffee untouched and cooling at a visible rate. The house went quiet the way refrigerators do between cycles. Walsh stayed long enough to copy the voice memo and to tell us what the storage warrant had found while we were sleeping boxes in a rented unit under a name that had never paid taxes, binders of wills and policies, and emails printed as if paper made them truer, a file with Richard's name. Not an accident, not the story the obituary told. She didn't linger on that. She said it cleanly and let the room decide what to do with it. By late afternoon, Ben was home. He lined dinosaurs along the windowsill to watch for anything that needed watching. Riley stood in the backyard with a trowel and a young serviceberry we'd bought from the nursery on the corner. The dirt was cold and smelled like every yard I've ever had. We planted the root ball in a hole that was deeper than it needed to be and exactly right. Inside, the kettle remembered its job. I poured hot water over 2 mint tea bags and set a third mug on the counter for a boy who likes to pretend he likes what we drink. Riley came in with soil under her nails and leaves caught in her hair. She leaned her forehead to mine for a second, the old checkpoint, then reached for her mug. Ben climbed onto a chair and studied us like he was memorizing a chart. Cookies, he asked, because that is how he measures whether the day has ended. In the blue tin, I said. He took 2 and split one cleanly to make it fair without being told. I stood at the sink and watched our reflections settle into the window, 3 faces, a small tree outside the maple moving exactly as much as it had to. The serviceberry's tag swung once in the wind and then was still. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.